Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's time, man. It's time for me to do this, man. It's time for me to hop into this dumbass debate that y'all got out here. No, wrong one. This dumbass debate that y'all got on the goddamn internet right now titled, "We done with the 90s. Michael Jordan ain't got no left hand." This is the dumbest shit I have ever seen. This is why I don't be on the social medias, bro. I don't be on the social medias because of dumb shit like this. This is why I don't have a TikTok. This is why I don't be on Twitter like that. I ain't been on Instagram in years. I'm about to delete my Instagram, by the way. I don't know why I still have it up. I really don't need it. Fuck Instagram. I don't really be on Facebook like that. Except to look at cars that I'm trying to buy. I'm trying to buy a car. So that's the only reason why I'm on Facebook right now. After that, I'm fuck Facebook. But this gotta be the dumbest shit I've ever heard. We done with the 90s. Everybody's saying this. We done with the 90s. The 90s is overrated. Y'all talk about the 90s like the 90s was this and the 90s that. Now listen, I understand. Some of you old heads, y'all take it a little bit too far. I don't like how y'all disrespect these newer players nowadays. Sometimes it's best to sit back and just watch and appreciate. I feel like that's a good idea, to just sit back, watch, and appreciate some of these players, because some of these players are actually dope. Some of these newer players are actually dope. Like, I like watching Jokic. I like watching Steph Curry when he go off. You know what I'm saying? Giannis, that's my favorite player right now. I love seeing Giannis. I love seeing Jokic. You know what I'm saying? I like seeing Luka when he not bitching, moaning, and complaining like a little crybaby. Because that's Luka's biggest problem. He a crybaby. I don't like that about Luka. That's the only thing I dislike about Luka. His game on point. He just a crybaby. I really wish he would stop crying and just let his game do the talking, because he is really talented. If he stop all that whining and bitching and moaning and complaining like a little baby, like he LeBron, stop all that whining and complaining like LeBron, bro. Just play your game, bro. You talented as fuck at this shit. But nah, man. I appreciate the newer generation of players, man. I enjoy watching them play, man. They're dope. Just as dope as it was to watch. Well, I was a 90s kid, so I really came up with the 2000s. So watching Allen Iverson dominate the league at well, realistically, he's 5'10". But you know what I mean. At the stature that he was at, watching Vince Carter jump out the gym doing crazy dunks every fucking night. Kobe just being a fucking beast that he was. Shaq, the most dominant fucking player of all time. Tracy McGrady, one of the most pure basketball athletes I've ever seen. Paul Pierce getting stabbed at a nightclub and then playing 82 games playing all 82 games in the season and taking his team all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's crazy. That's amazing, bro. It's amazing, bro. The shit that I've watched and experienced, bro, and still be watching basketball now and to see all the greatness that's going on now. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to really sit back and appreciate. I can't really get into what these idiots say on Twitter. I can't get into what the old heads say, because the old heads don't know what they're talking about. They not really watching the games like that. Then you got the young dumb idiots that swear up and down this new age is better than anything. Like, stop saying that Steph Curry would dominate the 90s. It's like, he would, but I mean, they do got hand checking, so you do got to deal with that. But it is what it is. Listen, man, I'm not here to debate that Listen, man, the 90s was the 90s, the 2000s was the 2000s, the 2010s was the 2010s, and we experiencing the 2020s. Who knows where this is going to be by 2030? You know what I'm saying? When we look back at the 2020s, who knows how this is going to go? But anyways, though, this is the dumbest argument I've seen. This is going to be the only video I do on this. I've been holding this off all week. This is my first time reacting to a Jimmy High Roller video, by the way. I hate Jimmy High Roller because he's a LeBron dick rider. I hate how he uses stats to try to prove that LeBron is better than 90% of the league, and it's not true. Them stats don't really mean stuff. Sometimes you can have empty stats. I do want y'all to know that. Sometimes you can have empty stats. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not hating on LeBron. I'm just saying some of these stats are empty. You know what I'm saying? I value winning over stats. You can have the stats, but how about you win sometimes? How about you stop getting swept and eliminated all the fucking time? How about you stop throwing your teammates under the bus? My issue with LeBron is deeper than what y'all think. See, the typical shit is LeBron can't do this, LeBron can't do that, LeBron can never beat Kobe, LeBron can never beat Jordan. No, my issues are deeper than that. I'm really looking at LeBron's game. That's my issue, and his game really don't match up or live up to what y'all niggas hype it up to be. Don't get me wrong, the nigga's talented as fuck, but his game just don't match up to the greats. And I'm sorry, but it just is what it is. I'm just looking at it, and I can break LeBron's game down with ease. But anyways, though, I'm wasting too much time. We gone 7 minutes in. I'm just ranting. Let's get right into this, though. We done with the 90s.
My brothers, we are in the midst of a civil war. The age-old debate of past versus present has reached critical mass, and sides have been taken. A revolution is taking place, and we're losing good men. Old school versus new school, back in the day versus modern day. A story as old as time itself. I tried to ignore this bloodbath, but just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, it all got so much worse.
We done with the 90s.
Film of NBA games from the 80s and 90s coming to light, showing that the good old days were in fact not that good. This whole time, the punishing defensive legend was actually just a bunch of plumbers camping out in the paint looking for someone. Shots clanking off the backboard, players running around aimlessly, wreaking havoc. And worst of all, Michael Jeffrey Jordan, the supposed greatest basketball player of all time, didn't even have a left hand.
That is the dumbest argument I've ever seen.
Have we been lied to about basketball in the 80s and 90s? Are we really done with that era of hoops? Or are we being deceived by lowlights, misinformation, and cherry-picked clips? Well,
pretty much, because who was really watching these games? You gotta watch the games to understand. You just can't watch the lowlights and be like, see, this is why Jordan ain't what y'all say he is. Jordan's so fucking overrated. It's like, yo, how about you watch the game in its entirety to get the context? You know, that's what I do. I really do my research. That's why I understand the game a lot better than most of these bozos on the internet. Which is why I don't get into these dumbass debates.
I think I've got an answer, and some of y'all ain't gonna like it. We done with the 90s. 5 simple words that have completely divided fans of the NBA. I've seen well-thought-out video essays, hard-hitting analysis, testimonies from past and present players talking about their experience in the league and how it's changed over the years. And none of those things managed to do what these 5 simple words have done in just a week. Soon enough, the clips came rolling in of players from that era dribbling off their feet, throwing up air balls, and putting together moves that you might see at your local high school's JV game. So, for
like this shit don't happen in the game now.
Here is my long-winded take on this whole discussion. I want to begin by saying what this discourse has taught me more than anything else is that NBA fans today never actually took the time to go back and watch games of the past.
Fact,
Brothers,
I just said
I have been harping on this for years, begging for fans of the game, whether you are new or have been watching for years, to just go back and watch full games. Not highlights, not clips, full-length games of eras from the past. And after seeing this discussion devolve into where it is today, it is clear to me that most people never take the time. I'm seeing countless fans have this sort of awakening as they're watching films of these old games as if the footage was buried or lost, and it's finally being unearthed for the world to see. It's been right here on YouTube for the past 15 years.
Facts.
You mean to tell me the same fans who chime in with a full-blown thesis on the GOAT debate never spared the time to even watch the games they were referring to? I guess that does explain a lot. Now, I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle on this whole discussion. I have said on multiple occasions that players in today's NBA are simply more skilled than players of the past, which has resulted in bigger stat lines and higher point totals than ever before. It's not the defense that has gotten worse, it's the offense that has gotten better. You know, that whole spiel. But I also have an appreciation for the greats that came before and how incredible some players of past eras were. In fact, I almost feel like I'm hallucinating seeing this 90s basketball slander campaign unfold in front of my eyes. It feels like everyone's perception on the age-old debate changed literally overnight. I know that's not the case, but after seeing all of this play out, it sure feels that way. But today, I'm not just going to show you some cherry-picked clips or unhinge this narrative even further. I'm going to show you real film, real data, and proof of how we might actually be done with the 80s and 90s. And, of course, if Michael Jordan really had no left hand. Spoiler, he did.
Thank you. The dumbest shit I ever heard. The game.
Now, I have been an advocate for the modern players are better than players of the past movement for quite some time now. In fact, as crazy as it is for younger fans to say Michael Jordan was trash, it's just as absurd for older fans to say the game hasn't evolved and gotten better over the last 30 years. Because that's all this debate really is. Young fans versus old fans, or fans that watched this versus fans that are watching this. But objectively, players today are much better than they were in the 80s and even the 90s. Specifically, the lower end of the talent pool in the NBA today is vastly better than it was in the past. I think great players would be great in any era, but with the spacing, the shot making, the emphasis on offense as opposed to defense has made the depth across the NBA today just way ahead of where it was in the 80s and the 90s. There was, without exaggeration, guys in the NBA throughout the 80s and 90s that were on NBA rosters just to accumulate fouls and sit in the paint and be big. Some of these players were offensively inept, and that was okay because their role was not to create offense. But in today's NBA, where offense reigns supreme, there is no room for these players. Now, you could and should go back and watch film of games, not highlights, from this era and see just how limited the skill sets of some of these players were. The shot making, for the most part, was limited to set jumpers, slashers coming downhill for layups, and big men trying to muscle their way to a bucket down low in the midst of what appears to be a wrestling match. Catch a player off guard with a double team, and they immediately pick up their dribble. Simple things like guards turning their back to the basket 20 feet out instead of creating space off the dribble. Even players looking down at the ball while trying to get out on a fast break was very common in this era. And these aren't lowlights or cherry-picked incidences. This is just what the game looked like 35 years ago. But even without film, nearly every metric suggests modern players are more capable of players in the past. Free throw percentage was worse, three-point percentage was worse, turnover percentage was higher, they used to shoot more free throws but still ended up with far less points. Now, this is not to say that this era of hoops was trash. That's just disingenuous and flat out wrong. These were the best players in the world at the time. It was just simply not as good as what it is today. But maybe there's another layer to this that needs to be factored in to really understand why these players were not as skilled as the players of today. Now, despite this being a very relevant topic for years, the idea of rule changes and how these changes have affected the game still remain a mystery to some. Players were a product of their era and the rules of their era. The first step to discovering greats of the past is to watch film of them play. The next step is to gather and understand the context of the film you are watching. When you see a 6'9" Magic Johnson go flying down the court with what looks like kind of a stiff dribble, you may think the man has no bag. But my friends, Magic Johnson did have a bag, but the rules in place at the time only allowed him to reach so far into it before he got called for every violation in the rulebook. Consider the fact that any move where your hand wasn't completely on top of the basketball was considered
back then they didn't allow that nigga ball, that street ball shit. What they used to call back then, they used to call that nigga ball. Nigger ball. That's what they used to call it. They used to call it nigger ball. You know, that playground shit. Hey, don't bring that shit up in here, boy. We don't play that nigger jimping job. You go play for the Harlem Globetrotters if you go do that crap. That's how it was back then. You couldn't do all that. You couldn't do all that herky jerky shit that you see now. All that shit you see Kyrie and Steph Curry, and other players do. All that herky jerky shit, couldn't get away with it back then. Because back then, the league had rules that you had to follow. And nigga ball was not in the it was not in the plans. You was not supposed to be out here playing nigga ball. You play the game the right way. You learn the fundamentals. You get the intangibles. Once you got all that in play, you learn how to play the game, but you limit yourself. So all that shit. So probably your dribble was probably like all out here, and you used to wop wop. But now you had to make it tighter, so now it's wop wop. You know what I'm saying? Like you had to learn this shit, bro. You had to really like learn the intangibles and play within the rules of the game because they were really strict back then. It's not like it is now where you can get away with a carry off a heavy. You know what I'm saying? You could take an extra step on a layup. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You can't do all that shit like you can. The game has evolved. So to say these people from the past don't got a bag or they can't do all the shit that they could do now, just remember the rules were different back then. The way how the game was played a little different back then. You had to have the intangibles. Once you made it to the collegiate level, all that playground herky-jerky shit, you instantly got all that ripped out your system. And you had to learn how to become you literally had to learn fundamentals and technique if you was going to make it to the league. That was the main rule. That nigga ball was not going to fly.
The carry. No 0 steps, no gather steps. You get 2 steps, and anything more was called a travel.
Facts.
No backward shuffles to create separation. No lunging
you don't
into
get
players to
4
draw
steps
easy fouls.
like you do
Here's
now.
a clip of Danny Ainge hitting Kevin McHale with a hezzy in the mid-'80s. And the man thinks he just witnessed witchcraft.
But when practice sessions were completed, some of the most competitive competition began.
Double dribble. Double dribble. He did too. I did.
Here's some more clips of players getting called for travels and carries doing moves that are very typical and allowed in 2024. 90% of the moves you see today, the very method most players generate their offense, would be called for some sort of violation 40 or 30 or even 20 years ago. And this isn't just some cop-out or excuse as to why these players of the past weren't doing this stuff. The rule changes are real, documented pieces of NBA history. You can literally look them up. The game got looser, players grew up and shaped their game around these looser rules, and now they have free reign to let their basketball bag run wild. But that's kind of the point. Players of the past didn't grow up practicing 25-footers. They didn't work on a dozen moves to create separation. They played in offensive systems that focused on the team, the collective, schemes and sets that resembled something closer to college basketball, where ISO possessions were few and far in between, so they never developed an arsenal to counter these situations. The rules of the time limited their game, which resulted in them having a more limited skill set than players today. If Larry Bird grew up with a three-point line, he might have been the greatest long-range shooter ever.
Facts.
But he didn't. And as a result, he didn't shoot a lot of threes, and he wasn't as efficient as the best shooters today. We can sit here and assume these players of the past might be as capable as players today if they were playing under the same rules and conditions. But they didn't. And I don't think we should assume that. The fact is, they played in a different time, and they became a product of that time. But that's not to say the game was trash back then, or that the superstars of these eras couldn't compete in today's league. Now, as time goes by, I think it's easy to forget just how long ago 1980 was. 44 years ago, if my math is correct, which is in fact a very long time ago. In 1985, Magic Johnson won an NBA title, Larry Bird won the league MVP, and Michael Jordan won Rookie of the Year. That was 39 years ago from today, which is the same exact amount of time that has passed from that 1985 season to the year the NBA was founded in 1946. Look at these clips. Do you think these players could compete with the likes of Bird, Magic, and Jordan? Let me answer that for you. No. But take the best players of the 80s and 90s, and could they compete in today's league? Absolutely. Give these guys some credit. Watching this today is the equivalent of watching this in the 80s. And yet this product is vastly closer to the basketball we see today than this product was to what fans were witnessing in the 80s. In fact, we can use different superstars as sort of a cross-generational measuring stick to see just how stiff the competition has been over the years. Larry and Magic played Michael, who played Kobe, who played LeBron, who has played the players of today. And nowhere down this timeline was there any real jump or fall off in production or level of competition from one era to the next. Each era had their stars. Those stars crossed paths with stars of other eras, and no one era was clear-cut ahead of the other. If the 80s were so bad, then why did players of the 90s have to wait for those guys to get old and retire to have a shot at winning? And if the 90s were so bad, then why did players of the 2000s not win until those guys retired? We don't need to assume that adjacent eras could compete with one another because we actually saw it. MJ struggled with some of the guys that came before him. Shaq struggled against Hakeem and Kobe struggled against MJ. LeBron struggled against guys like Duncan and Dirk. And players of today have struggled to get past some of the older players in the league who are a product of the previous era. Now, what we shouldn't do is jump 3 or 4 eras at a time, ignoring entire decades of evolution and saying the game back then was better or even as good as it is today. At a certain point, the knowledge and wisdom that comes from actually witnessing decades of NBA history, like some older fans have, becomes skewed and watered down by nostalgia and a generational bias. Superstars are superstars because their game transcends the era they played in, but they also played in an inferior league. These two ideas are not mutually exclusive, and although generational talents of the past would do just fine today, this same logic does not apply to the vast majority of the league throughout the 80s and 90s. So if the 80s were inferior to today's league and the 90s were inferior as well, when did the NBA become not trash? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Ironically, I think there's a pretty clear distinction to the skill set of players before Michael Jordan hit his peak and after. For example, the early 90s and late 90s, although being in the same decade, were massively different in play style and skill set. Think for a second about the fact that Magic Johnson was still in his prime in the early 90s and Allen Iverson was entering his prime in the late 90s. In less than 10 years, basketball became a massively different game. By the late 90s, the players who grew up watching Jordan fly through the air and slice up defenses were in the league and were reshaping the role that perimeter players played. Guys like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Stephon Marbury, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, all these guys came into the league around the same time and were products of what they saw MJ do throughout his career. Players with a skill set that more closely resembles what we see today than it did to the skill sets of players of the 80s and even early 90s. This is where I think most fans might make the distinction of when the league really took a leap not in competitiveness, but rather play style. You can go back and watch these guys play, and it's not too different than watching an NBA game today. Or you can point to the shift in play style that happened in the late 2010s, after Steph Curry redefined what makes a great championship caliber player, and the league adjusted to this new three-point heavy, perimeter-focused style of basketball. Similar to Jordan, the kids who watched what Steph was doing in the mid-2010s emulated that style of play, tailored their games to it, and are now in the league doing things that only Steph could do a decade ago. So if we're done with the 80s and 90s, where can we look back and no longer apply this era tax on these players? I think most fans would agree that the turn of the century is where the modern era of hyper-skilled players began. You can say objectively that this era was not trash, and most players of this generation would do just fine in today's league. But if that is the case, then modern NBA fans are holding a ticking time bomb, and they might not even know it. When we are older and a new generation of NBA fans claim our favorite players, the guys we grew up watching, are not as good as the players of the future, what will you have to say? Right now, there is no one in the world who can shoot like Steph Curry. But inevitably, there will be. And eventually, there will be many players who can shoot like him. His records will fall, his percentages won't look as good through the lens of 2040, and although his legacy will be cemented, his actual game will be put into question. And based on the arguments I'm hearing today on why past players were trash, we will have nothing to say that will change their minds. We know that Curry was the first to do what he's doing. He is a pioneer.
I agree with everything he's saying here, cause this is the same thing I say. Like, for all y'all niggas that keep making fun of me, cause I keep saying I'm 29 and I'm pushing 30. I'm saying it as a joke, but y'all taking it a little too far with the whole nigga, you getting old ass nigga, yeah, you unk. And I just keep just to remind you, you're not that far behind. You're gonna reach this. I'm gonna just tell y'all right now, once you hit 25, it goes all downhill from here. Just a heads up. So if you working out and you keeping yourself in shape, might want to keep up that consistency, my brother, because after 25, oh man. But yeah, man, and that same thing applies to this. Y'all talking shit right now about the 90s, but 20 years from now, 20, 30 years from now, motherfuckers gonna be saying the same shit about the 2010s and the 2020s. So y'all better watch your mouths.
Of the modern NBA, we have context to back up our claims. But if we aren't willing to hear older fans out today, what makes us think younger fans will hear us out in the future? Mark my words. There will be a day when young fans will go back, watch film of LeBron, and say he couldn't compete with players of the future. In fact, it's already happening. Fans saying he has no bag. Younger players putting up bigger numbers than he ever did. Skill sets a bit deeper with games that look more polished. It's all fun and games now to crack jokes about past eras. But our day will come too, and it ain't gonna be pretty. But Giannis could only run and dunk. Your era was trash. Y'all had a dude who couldn't get 2 feet off the ground.
The Giannis slander will not be tolerated. The Giannis slander will get you shot over
will already be made up. This is why I think it is so
you will get shot over
genuine, thought-out discourse about the game if you're truly a fan of it. But to all of the older fans out there, you kinda started this whole thing. For years, we heard y'all badmouth modern players, saying the league is soft, players today couldn't compete back then. Back in my day, real men played the game. Y'all cannot be mad that some fans are done with the 80s and 90s when y'all never even gave modern basketball a chance. Sure, a lot of fans never took the time to go back and watch the greats of the past, but let's be honest for a second. Older fans don't watch games today. They catch
Facts. The old heads don't understand either. The old heads are just as bad as the youngins. Like, this is why I don't be in these spaces, bro. I wish that YouTube would stop putting this shit in my algorithm. I don't agree with anything that goes on in the NBA sector of YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I don't want to be here. Stop putting this shit in my fucking algorithm, YouTube. Please. I don't want to see this shit. I'm not a part of this. I am an NBA head. I love watching the highlights. I love seeing when somebody goes off for 50, 60, 70. I love to go through and watch those games and see how somebody was going off. But my thing is this. I don't enter these fucking sectors of the basketball community. These are the low-level scumbags that only watch highlights and don't really be saying nothing. Watch the game instead of the highlights. Because if you watch the game and then you get more context on the stats and you'll understand some shit. Versus just watching the highlights and being like this, saying LeBron James is the ultimate flop. Which, I mean, that's not technically wrong. He technically is a flopper, but will he crumble under the physicality of the 90s? Hell no. He's 6'9", 270. You really think somebody like that can't handle the physicality of the 90s? Nigga. LeBron would be a demon in the 90s. Would he beat Jordan? Absolutely not. But he would definitely be a demon in the 90s. He would definitely give a couple of teams the run for their money. But the Bulls, hell no.
Stray clip on Facebook of LeBron flopping, and like an echo chamber of disgruntled old men, they just start firing away in the comments, agreeing with one another. Y'all asked for this. I've been watching the NBA since the mid-2000s. Kobe, D-Wade, McGrady, Iverson, Shaq, Nash, those were my guys. But I can acknowledge those greats and say they were incredible while also acknowledging that that version of the NBA as a whole was not as refined or as good as it is today. Now, will I be able to make that distinction in 20 years when some snot-nosed brat tells me my glorious king was trash? I'm not so sure. Now, it's time to once and for all take a real close look at this accusation that Michael Jordan did not have a left hand. I felt like I was having a bad dream when I first saw this claim, but unfortunately, I was not. I feel like no one actually believes this. This is just some high-level trolling. But in an effort to stop this nonsense from spreading any further, I have no choice but to take these accusations seriously. So I selected 8 random games ranging from Michael Jordan's rookie season all the way up to the mid-90s, and play by play gathered all of his possessions throughout these games, charted when he went to his right, when he went to his left, and what those possessions resulted in. And here is what I found. Jordan made a move with his left hand or his right hand 227 times. Of those 227 moves, 121 of them were with his right hand and 106 of them were with his left hand. Of the 121 right-handed moves, he passed up or got fouled on 54 of them, so I didn't bother charting those. 65 of these moves resulted in a shot, in which he made 63% of them and only turned the ball over 2 times. Now, moves that he made with his left hand resulted in a pass or him getting fouled 45 times, while 55 of these left-handed moves ended up in a shot, in which he made 51%, and 6 moves resulted in a turnover. So based on this data, Jordan was definitely more comfortable going right, especially near the rim and even on mid-range jumpers.
Well, duh,
he struggled
he's
a bit
right-handed
in comparison to his right whenever he pulled up off of a left-handed dribble. But overall, Jordan went to his left 47% of the time, and although it was his weaker hand, he was still above league average even while going to his left. But 8 games and 350 minutes of basketball is a relatively small sample size. So I looked into it further and found this: a detailed breakdown of Michael Jordan's shot chart and shot tendencies in 3 seasons from 1990 to 1992. 126 games and over 4,800 minutes in total, tracking exactly what Michael did on the court for 3 seasons. And here's what the data shows. In total, Michael made 1,074 moves in isolation, going either to his right or to his left hand. 48% of those moves were with his right hand, and 52% of those moves were with his left hand. When going to the right, Michael shot 61.7% on 410 shots with 15 turnovers, resulting in 1.38 points per possession. When going to his left, Michael shot 61.3% on 421 shots with 36 turnovers, resulting in 1.31 points per possession. So even with a much larger sample size, Michael not only had a left hand, he went to it just as often as he went to his right and was nearly as proficient with his left as he was with his right. Now for some context, throughout this 3-year span, Michael made on average 4.4 left-handed isolation moves, or in this case, isolation possessions, that resulted in 1.31 points per possession. Now here are some prolific scores from this season and their overall tendencies and efficiency in isolation. Keep in mind, this data includes both right-handed and left-handed moves from these players. And now here is Michael Jordan with just his left hand. So, yeah, I'd say contrary to what has now become popular belief, Michael Jordan had a left hand. And I cannot believe we had to dig into the data to come to this conclusion.
That's crazy.
I think the overall idea that the 80s and 90s were a far less skilled time in the NBA compared to today is probably fair. I mean, you'd be crazy to think the game hasn't evolved in 4 decades. But to say the league was trash back then is just wrong. I think more than anything, it's the style of play and the way basketball games would unfold back then that really throws some fans off when they go to watch film of these old games. It's like looking at a box score from the mid-2000s and thinking everyone sucked because the games finished with final scores in the 80s. But the players weren't bad, it was just a different game back then. It was slower, more methodical, more team and scheme-based than it is today. And similarly, I think you could say the 80s and 90s had its fair share of bad basketball. But that doesn't mean all the players were bad, especially the superstars of those eras. That was just the state of the game they were playing in. I think some older fans have a skewed perception of how good the game was back then, but I also think they just genuinely liked that style of ball regardless of the evolution of the league. In 20 years, there could be a dozen players around the league that shoot like Steph Curry, but I doubt we will hold the same appreciation and affinity for those players as we did to the guy who pioneered this style of play and did it during the good old days. In the 90s, no one looked back at how the league was in the 60s claiming it was better, and so realistically, we shouldn't be looking back at the 80s and 90s claiming the league was superior than it is today, or even just as good for that matter. A lot of these ideas that favor modern basketball are becoming more mainstream as fans dive deeper into these topics and add context to narratives that have been floating around for decades. But I think this push to be done with the 80s and 90s is a bit overkill. We want to add context and nuance and knowledge to these discussions, not remove entire decades from it altogether. Sadly, I don't think any of this has or will change anyone's mind. This revolt against old school ball was either confirmation of what you already thought, or this entire discussion is just blasphemy to you. Are we done with the 80s and 90s?
Fuck no.
Maybe, but for the sake of the game and the greats that paved the way, I sure hope not.
All right, man. So there you have it. Are we done with the 90s? Fuck no. And if you are done with the 90s, then watch the full games today and really break down and analyze your hypothesis of why you're done with the 90s. How about we do something like that before we just shit on the 90s because you think LeBron is better than Jordan? Come on, man. Like let's put context into it. Like let's really sit down, let's watch the game so we can really have a true discussion about the game of basketball. This argument is so fucking stupid. I hate where we are right now. This is why I don't be on here like that. Bro, everybody know back in the days, I used to be a basketball junkie. I used to talk basketball all day, every day. Y'all know I love the game of basketball. I still do. Even though I don't talk about it as much because I done jumped into the whole music and hood movie genres now. I done switched it up a little bit now. I still do dibble and dabble in the NBA specter every now and again. But I do want to make this very clear. This is the dumbest fucking argument to ever fucking exist. I really want y'all to understand that. You people that made this shit up are fucking morons. You are low IQ individuals. And you must be taken off the census immediately. Y'all niggas need to be taken off the census immediately. For real. I'm going to just say it like this. Your mama should have swallowed you. And your daddy should have pulled out. That's all I'm going to say. You fucking incels. But anyways, though, let me know what y'all think down in the comment section below. Are y'all done with the 90s? Please give some proper context into why you're done with the 90s. Don't just say because LeBron's better than Jordan. That's dumb. That's a dumb argument. You're only talking about two players. If you say you're done with the 90s, you have to go into context about every single aspect of the game. We talking about the analytics, the stats, the players themselves, the teams. You have to really break it down to me why you're done with the 90s. Don't just say because LeBron is this, Curry is this, Jordan could never, Patrick Ewing and Hakeem Olajuwon ain't even that good. Like, yo, really break it down for me. Really break it down for me. If you can't do that, you're not worthy of having a conversation with me when it comes to basketball. That's all I'm going to say. You fucking incel, kill yourself. Goodbye.